Inside the Artist Studio. I am here with the wonderful Luke Anderson, who's calling in from Salt Lake City. Hey, Luke, how are you?
I'm doing well, Rose. How about you?
I'm doing great. So, when I first met you, it's been a handful of years now. You were fresh out of college in Wyoming and doing some work, doing some science work and doing, and ever since then, holy mackerel, your career has taken off. I'm amazed.
Yeah, I've thought back, sort of reflected on that period a lot recently, and it's pretty amazing. I just try to, I don't know, remember that where I started from and who's helped get me to where I am, and how things have changed in both how I work and how I think about how I work, and
Oh,
my tastes have changed. And yeah, there's a lot that's different, but yeah, I'm grateful that I'm doing what I'm doing. So
yeah. Well, and I'm grateful that you're just doing that too and not having to juggle a bunch of other stuff. I mean, I cannot wait to see. Now I know the two paintings on the wall and there's a third one that yeah, and we're going to get a close up of that one here. Are coming to us in Denver for our contemporary realist show this January at Gallery 1261. I would love for you to talk a little bit more about how things have changed for you. You said your tastes have changed, and I know subject matter's changed a little bit. And will you talk to me a bit about that? What's like affected that for you?
that's a good question. I mean, part of it's just like natural evolution and maturity. When you get started in something like this, you kind of just work with what you know and what you've seen, which, like, when you start, is usually going to be a smaller a smaller segment of what's possible. And so, yeah, I think, like, I just kind of have taken every opportunity to expose myself to different kinds of art. Like, anytime I travel,
Um,
um, try not to really, like, segment myself into so back then, like, I would have been much more willing to say, like, yeah, I'm a Western artist. I don't brand myself that way anymore. And I think I've just tried to allow myself to, like, go back and think about the types of art that I was attracted to, like, before I became an artist,
oh, interesting.
and try and let sort of some of that stuff show through a little bit more. And, like, as a lot of artists will go through, just, like, really try to kick that tendency to want to think about what people will like and what's going to
Mm.
sell, and just try and follow your own vision, and be true to that voice inside you. So I think that's like, and that's really like easier said than done.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
Doing
Well,
it as a career.
yeah, right. I mean, I think one of the hardest things, and this is coming from a non-painter, a non-artist, is to try to quiet the voice of, is anyone going to like this? Who's going to buy it? Someone's got to buy this. If you don't sell this, and just that critic of, you
Hmm.
know, pay attention to the audience, or you're a Western artist guy. But I think it's one of the hardest things to kind of get past, I think.
Yeah,
Maybe you always have it a little bit though.
I think, yeah, I think that is the balance that you have to strike, is because you can't be, like, totally ignorant of that
Right.
when you're trying to do it as a career.
Mhm.
You have to pay attention to it a little bit. And it's just a balance. And I think having multiple different outlets, for your work, I think it's good, so you don't get, like, too pigeonholed into one thing. I think I've tried to embrace, like, just trying to make and finish as much stuff as possible, with the idea that, or accepting sort of the reality that like not everything is going to be amazing, and that's kind of the point. Like there's some quote, I don't remember who it's by, but it's like something along the lines of uh like you make like 90% of the work you make is going to be bad, so that the 10% that is great like can really shine, or something like that. And
I did an interview with Wayne Thiebaud years
oh,
ago, and
mm,
he said, I do 10 paintings to throw 9 away.
yeah,
Mhm. Yeah,
that's yeah, so some version of that.
right, right.
It's hard, like that's a there's been a lot of like sort of psychological and mental hurdles that I think I've sort of had to evolve and come
Mhm.
to terms with over the last couple of years. And that's one of the things and especially like art in the sort of the age of social media, where like you always have to put something out there. um I
Mhm.
think like that sort of philosophy is, I don't know, it's harder to like really embrace that sort of philosophy of like I'm going to accept that 70% or more of what I make like isn't ever going to see the light of day.
That's it's not good odds, honestly, if you think about it. But I think in a sense, you know, if you're an artist, it's all for the art, you know, you have to be kind of a purist to some extent.
Yeah, and I think that's hard. That's a hard balance too. Is like how much, because we have to. You know, I'm sure every artist out there will admit that we hold ourselves to like insanely high standards.
Hmm.
But if you do that too much, like you probably won't ever have anything to show.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
sometimes you have to like make a concession.
What do you do? So what do you do when, like, do you have an artist group that you get together and, I mean, do you bounce stuff off people, or what do you do?
Nothing sort of formal in a group. I have a lot of relationships with individual artists that will go to for different things.
Uh,
Yeah, nothing organized. That might be fun though.
yeah, yeah. I was just talking to a sculptor, and she's getting up there in years, but in her real formative years, she was at this studio building and surrounded by, you know, a lot of stuff. And she said it was just so vital for her when she was starting out. Now she doesn't have that same input, but you know, I just think that for artists, that's got to be because you're solitary for so much of
Hmm.
the work part of it that I don't know, it seems like.
Yeah, and I've thought about that too. Also in terms of being self-taught. So like because I didn't go through any kind of, like I know a lot of people who have gone through not necessarily even an art graduate program, but like just graduate programs like form really strong, long-lasting bonds in a cohort. And
Yeah.
I never got so in addition to some of the struggles that come along with being a self-taught artist, like in just a purely like technical sense,
Hmm.
are also some like social disadvantages to that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, so let's talk about the work a little bit. And a lot of the work I remember when you were first starting out had wildlife in it. And also you were doing figurative work to
Mhm,
a little bit. Um,
mhm.
and now what I'm seeing over your shoulder is more pure landscape with the big shapes and the, you know, the nice harmonious colors working. Is this part of the evolution of what's going on with the work?
Yeah, that's definitely been something that's evolved. Is I have gone more into not strictly, but for the most part, just landscape.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, I don't know exactly how to describe why, other than it's just what appeals to me most, and I just don't, yeah, I don't know exactly. I think some of the stuff I did early on was like it was, it served a purpose and was good for my development, but it wasn't maybe as true to my experience, or like
Mm,
what I really appreciated or liked about where I lived. And I think that's some of that is sort of what I was mentioning earlier, is just sort of being able to identify some of those things that are really inspiring and driving for me and in the region that I live and travel. And I
yeah,
think that my experience, my general like experience in philosophy is like not particularly super anthropocentric. Like I'm not around people a lot. I don't,
mm,
I'm just not a very like people driven person all the time.
mm,
Um
yeah, yeah.
and some of that, like, yeah, is just sort of solitude out
Mhm.
in the landscape, is I think just more true to who I am as a person. And I think also with my just with how the aesthetics have evolved too. Like I think the landscape offered, at least recently, and how I've been thinking about it, has offered some more, seems like more sort of interesting visual possibilities.
Mhm. Interesting. So, and you're, correct me if I'm wrong, you were born and raised in Wyoming,
Right.
and then so made the move to Salt Lake. So what I'm seeing looks very Utah inspired. Is this, are you painting, are you mostly a studio painter or are you an on location guy?
Studio.
Studio.
I've
Mhm.
tried I've tried plein air painting, and it like I I will never question the benefits of it. Like
Mhm.
it's very, very beneficial and helpful, but
Mhm.
it just wasn't something that I actively like enjoyed.
Yeah.
Um it was always like almost felt a little bit like a chore, like homework a little bit.
Oh, interesting.
I take the experiences like out there on the site as more of a experiential sort of, rather than trying to get everything, all the information while I'm there. It's more like being present and a little bit like meditative, and making mental notes and
Mhm.
um things like that. So
Hey, would you do a screen share and show us that other painting? I would love to just dive into that up close. And
yes.
okay, so let me ask you this, Luke, because something that I'm also wondering about in the work is that it's less of a like a pictorial. Like I feel like this is where you were going over the last couple of years. Less of like, hey, here is this kind of idea or thing, more to now you are playing with these shapes and these gradations of color and actually playing with mood and emotion.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like necessarily want to use brand myself as like a minimalist, but there's like that is sort of the underlying philosophy, I think, behind a
Mm,
lot of what I do now. Like things have gotten kind of generally more flattened
mm,
in shape. Um, but using like I'm really interested in the idea of like seeing how much you can simplify something in order to keep it sort of recognizable, and then using these like tenets of landscape
mm.
painting, what we know, things like color and temperature shifts to convey senses of space and atmosphere and
Yeah.
things like that. Like I really want to see how I can use those elements kind of like as simply as possible.
Hmm.
I've actually all of these pieces are, they're primarily acrylic based rather than oil. And so some of the like the sort of stylistic things have come from that shift.
Because
And
you were oil, right? I was wondering. I saw acrylic. I'm like, was he always acrylic? But
I started changing this year because
mm,
uh it was becoming clear to me that with oil was starting to present more problems than solutions, I guess, in order to like try and keep up with with production demand, the
Mm,
further I got in my career. And like,
mhm.
uh, I guess to be perfectly frank and honest with myself, like I make a lot of mistakes, and I have to correct a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And I like to paint in layers anyway, so I thought maybe I would just give it a try and see if there were benefits to acrylic.
Mm.
Um, and so that's like one. Obviously, acrylics dry really quickly, and it's a little bit harder to get the nice like smooth blending that you can get with oils. So I
Mm.
decided to, instead of trying to like poorly mimic that, according to like my sort of limited acrylic abilities and knowledge, I wanted to see what I could do with like optical mixing and gradations by
Oh.
using still like hard edges and straight lines,
Mm.
um, but like intermixing. I don't know if you can see my mouse on here, but
Yeah.
um, so like creating this gradation in the sky, like these are all sort of independent bands of isolated color, but and
Mhm.
then with the cloud down here, but sort of intermixing and like overlapping those different colors. So when you do see it from a distance, when you step back, or you see it on a smaller screen, um, it comes off as a gradation.
Nice.
So
You had mentioned that you kind of went back to thinking about the artists early on that you were most attracted to their style and their work. Can you mention some of those? Are any come to mind?
um, mostly what mostly I was thinking about, I really liked abstract expressionism,
Oh,
like when I was a teenager. And
mm,
like my work is it's not it's not abstract, sort of in that sense, but I think it has made me think a lot about um about like surface, for one thing, like surface quality,
mm-hmm,
or
mm-hmm.
even if you have a flat color field, like what can I do to make that flat area of blank color like interesting on its own if you were to see it in person. Because I think that's one thing like about those works that I really liked, was like how dynamic they are when you can get
Mm,
up close and like look at them from different angles and see how it changes. um so some things like that. And then also thinking about like trying to shift my thinking a little bit more away from like purely like illusionistic
oh,
realism to more like thinking about the colors in the scene, um, as an overall harmony, that maybe is not fully dependent on creating a convincing realistic naturalistic illusion, but more about using what's there to like create a interesting thing to look at, I guess, if that makes sense.
yeah, that definitely makes sense. And it actually, I'm glad I asked you that because it makes a lot of sense that you were so influenced early on by abstract expressionism. Because I think there's always been that, I don't know that I would ever, even when you were including wildlife, I don't know that I'd ever really label you as a Western artist because I never really felt like that was your shtick. Um, but it's interesting, and I love the progression of the work and where it's going. And I think it's, in a sense, all the more powerful because probably something that you could be labeled as more of a naive artist, like an artist who didn't come with all of this training and you got to do it this way and here's the tradition. You're kind of making your own tradition in a sense.
Yeah, which I think is has advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
there are there are certainly times where I'm like, it'll take me like 2 or 3 years to learn a lesson that maybe could have just been taught to me, in 6 months or something.
Right.
But then you discover interesting things along the way. And I've sort of tried to embrace the philosophy lately that like the the real art, the thing of value, that the art object is the thing that comes from um sort of the failure to perfectly execute your vision. It's like the accidents and mistakes and weird things that happen when you just try to get what's out of your brain, and like not the perfect thing that's in there. It's the imperfections and the weird stuff that happens when we try to translate the idea to reality. And
Yeah. Yeah. I'm wondering if you would stop the screen share so we could see the other two again a little bit. Perfect over your shoulder. And um, so are these done now? Are they done? And
uh yeah,
oh,
essentially, yeah, for all intents and purposes.
wow.
I do, yeah, they're done. I do some, so they're acrylic based, but I still use some oil, some
Oh,
transparent oil, like glazing over the top.
oh,
Um,
wow.
almost like a, I started thinking about them kind of like filters,
Hmm.
like you could put on, you know, an image on your computer.
Oh, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
but you using multiple layers of really thin, transparent
Mm.
oil paint to sort of, like you mentioned like mood. That's one thing that it can do. It can sort of like
Nice.
help to kind of like dull the harshest colors, and can I really like to, I like old things. I like things that age well, that like show their age and age well. I like old photos, and you know, like antiques, leather and wood and things like that. And I've wanted to incorporate things like that into my paintings. So a lot of them, I'll sort of like beat down the surface with sandpaper, so they're a little bit like rough and beat up and scratched, and
Oh,
then I'll do these glazing layers, which kind of give them that like little hint of like an old Polaroid or something like
oh,
that.
wow.
Um,
Very cool.
so
So you just you just have to see these in person because yeah, you
yeah.
got to get that surface in person. Oh, that's really cool. Well, I love the progression, and I just feel like I need to brag on you a little bit. I mean, you've like in the timeline of your work as an artist, really when you made the leap to go after this full time, it's not been all that long. You are in, you're going to be, of course, in our contemporary realism show, which I think is just the perfect place for you to really look at, you know, what living artists are doing with realism today and how you're pushing and pulling ideas and shapes and all that kind of great stuff. But you're also at Visions West, and you're at Gallery Wild in Jackson and Santa Fe. And so, and congratulations in the Quest for the West at the Idle George Museum in Indiana. And incredible,
Yeah.
incredible, really.
Yeah, it was a really fun show and experience. It's a really awesome museum.
Yeah.
Anybody ever finds themselves in Indianapolis.
You know, it's a yeah, I mean, there's a museum about the West in Indianapolis, but and it's a gorgeous museum too. It's amazing. But yeah, I mean, honestly, it's just to see what you've done and how you've progressed, and you have some great champions who recognize that you're not the usual player out there. You really have a contemporary sensibility about you, and you're not constrained. So, I mean, these are all the things I love about your work. And I remember when I first saw it in Cheyenne
Mhm. Yeah.
at a little show in Cheyenne, and I was like, this guy's really got something. And so anyway, you're one of my favorites to keep an eye on. So I hope everybody else keeps an eye on you too. Um, Luke Anderson, thank you so much for giving me some time this afternoon. I appreciate it. We'll look forward to seeing you hopefully in January if you can make it over the pass and come to the show in Denver. It'd be great. Um, And happy holidays. And we hope everyone watching this can come by and see the show and see Luke's work too. And hey, take good care of yourself, man.
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me.
Absolutely. See you soon.
Bye.